Philippe, welcome to the podcast. Thanks so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having me.
You've been working in the wider automotive mobility and financing world for a number of years. Let's learn a little bit more about yourself first. What did your career over the past decades look like?
Yeah, almost 4 decades, not quite though, but 36 years with Ford, 6 years with Ford proper, and 30 years with Ford Credit, which is pretty proper too, I would say. And so, yes, the last 33 decades, I focused on mobility through financing, was very instrumental in spreading and growing what we call trade cycle management. And I've been managing subsidiaries of Ford Credit in a number of countries around the world. More recently, I was the CEO of Ford Credit France. And for a couple of years now, I am running an advisory little startup, you could call it, in that very space. So mobility, and quite frankly, there is always something happening. It's not a boring space. And what can I add to that? We've seen technology impact our world quite early on. And I would say that the recent hype in AI is resonating very well with me because we actually engaged in AI quite earlier on. I would say a good 20 years back. So maybe we can talk about that a little bit today.
Yeah, no, it's fascinating. Thank you so much for the overview. Let's actually start with the beginning. Lots of people that sort of my wider network, they don't really know how car financing actually works. So would you, just in sort of plain language, mind help us trying to understand how does car financing across the globe actually work today?
Yeah, it's an interesting field because it's available almost anywhere. I mean, I worked on car financing plans in Vietnam, in China, in Latin America, also fascinating world there where lottery plays a big role. So car financing, it's available everywhere, just about, but it's usually very localized. So each market has its own way of doing it. And it's can be quite localized. If I just take an example, you don't do the business at all in the north of France or in Belgium, for instance. And if you cross the channel in the UK, it's something else as well. So it's very, processes are a little bit different. It's highly regulated, like most finance businesses. And so each country has come up with their own rules and their own ways of doing things. In that context, it was an interesting challenge to roll out, let's say, a growing concept, which has been the trade cycle management concept, where people don't actually own the car, they own the part of the car they're planning to use. So they go for leasing package. There are different names for them depending on the country where you are. But at the end, it's always a little bit the same concept. You pay a monthly installment, which covers the parts that you're going to be using the car. So often it's 3 years and shorter, sometimes longer, depends on the market. In Europe, I would say the average would probably be 48 months, so 4 years. But you have markets where I've worked, like in the Nordics, for instance, like in Denmark, where we go up to 96 months. But of course, people don't use their car that long. They often change it, typically with family changes or priority changes or all kinds of changes happening to people. And so these packages make it easier for people to um, have a newer car, if not a new car, and to pay only for the usage of it. And quite frankly, you're going to be hearing a lot more about this concept of usage versus ownership. I wanted to also stress that I spent quite a lot of my time setting up plans for Jaguar and Land Rover in a lot of different markets. And when the brand was purchased from Ford from Tata, I was also, in fact, I was the person in charge of finding new financing sources for Jaguar and Land Rover worldwide. And this was a very interesting time. I would say a good 15, maybe, yeah, 15 years ago-ish, maybe a little bit more than that. I can't recall the exact date, but it's been a while. And so what you do, you go to your dealer, you choose a car, you explain your budget, you say a little bit what you want to do with the car. It's quite critical. And then the salesman will jump on the computer, enter your data, and in most cases, not all, but in most cases, you're going to get an acceptance immediately. Nowadays, we're running on what we call auto acceptance in the range of 70%. Depends again on the market, but it's very high up there. So if all your data is correct, if you tick the box for open banking, if you are a normal person with income and you're asking for a reasonable car for you, that's also quite important. Usually it's auto accepted. So instantly the bank will decide to lend you the money, and instantly the salesman will be able to make you sign the order form. And in Europe, it's not so common that you drive out with the car, but in many cases you could. In Europe, this is more like a US habit. In the US, you go to the dealership, you file in your data, the salesman does the process with the computer. It barely lasts more than 5 minutes, and you walk out and you drive your car. In Europe, there's a little bit more delay because of registration, because of maybe you want something special on your car that needs to be fitted. And typically you come a couple of days later and you pick up your car and off you go. That's the first time around. The second time around, meaning once you've used that car for 3 years, well, your contract is due and it's the end of it. So you go back to the dealership with your car, you return the car, and then you select a new car. Possibly you have one more child, or you, I don't know, you change job or whatever. You need something else, so you're going to be able to adapt the vehicle you're using. In your world, you may have signed up for an XJ because you you had a lot of travel to do, long distance driving and everything. But now, okay, you don't do these long driving anymore, and you're gonna pick up a different Jaguar, or you're gonna jump to Land Rover and go for a Defender because now, okay, you're retired and you're happy to go in the countryside, and so your needs evolve. So the car that you use is not the same. But the same salesman will be able to take your XG. Hopefully it's in good shape. Of course, if you damage the car, you may have to pay some cost to put it back to normal state. But in most instances, if you took good care of your car, you just drop it at the dealership and it's the end of it. And you can start the new deal with the new car that matches better your needs at that moment. And off you go. And I've had customers who've gone through this cycle, 15 times.
Mm.
It never stops. And it's gives you the pleasure of driving a new car for your budget, whatever budget you've set aside. You can enjoy a brand new car without having to worry about returning or reselling, fixing it, or even maintaining it, because most of our plans nowadays offer maintenance, all kinds of assistance plan. You can actually add on to the pure leasing all kinds of other services, which are very popular, very popular.
Mm.
And all brand across all brands. People may think, Jaguar, no, the people who run Jaguars, they are very rich, they don't need financing. It's not really the point. The point is about usage, and it's about not having to deal with the problems that come eventually with an old car.
Mm.
I don't know if that is that enough for you. I can go on forever, Fabian,
No,
on this topic. So you
that's
can you
super
have
helpful.
you have to
You
pace
mentioned a
me.
couple of important points there that I would like to delve deeper into. And one was around this element of instant acceptance, which leads me
Yes,
sort of the topic of today, which is of course sort of more widely artificial intelligence.
yes.
What role does AI play in car financing?
Massive. And we're not talking of large language models. We're talking about AIs, so inferring engines, which are able to um, look at data and take decisions. If I make it very short, it's a computer engine, so a software who's able to scrutinize data ongoingly and take decisions, and give you also some informations uh, that is very useful. First, to accept or not the deal, and I'll give an example. But then after, once the customer is on board, um, how do we manage that customer is also driven by AI today. So let me give you just an example. Earlier I said that what's important is that the car you want to jump in matches your situation. So if you're 18 and you're asking for a Range Rover, immediately the software will say, Mr. 18, I'm not sure this is your, why do you want a Range Rover? There is a mismatch. So if you're 18 and you're not royal, or you don't have a special case, of course you have a special case, but most 18-year-old kids, if they walk into a Range Rover store and they ask for on the Range Rover, it will not be automatically accepted because there is a mismatch, right? Well, I think we can all understand why there would be a mismatch given the price of this car and the typical income of an 18-year-old person. But on the contrary, if you're 18, you just started, you've got the first job, you have a normal income for a young man or young lady, and you apply for, an Evoque maybe, or a used Defender maybe. That could be, for a young couple who really loves Land Rover and they want to get started with Land Rover. They could apply for leasing on a used Defender, for example. I'm just taking that example. And then if all the data they've given, the couple has given, um, uh, is then submitted to the finance company, then these data are being processed. If the customer is already known, then it's merged with all the data we have on that customers, and then instantly or almost instantly, the computer will say you're approved, and the salesman can get going and get you signed the the order form. So how does that work? Well, the computer computes a probability of payment, um, which is the first metrics that we will look at to say yes or no, we're going to give you the money to buy the car. This probability of payment is a moving target. What made a customer acceptable 20 years ago is not what makes the customer acceptable today. And those changes are very subtle. They're very, every day it changes a little bit, but it's not, there's nothing radical. It's always by small increments. And, you know, some situations in life have evolved now. For instance, I think I mentioned earlier the case of the bishops or the generals, which back in the 90s were a bit off limit for finance companies, because at that time you didn't have direct debit, you didn't have any ways to collect except just knocking at the door. So at that time, very high up people were not very well, they were almost like prohibited for finance companies because we had no ways to collect from a general or from a bishop. But gradually, with the time, the AI have picked up all the changes in society, and they've integrated the fact that if the bishop gives you a direct debit, a SIPA form, fully signed, okay, now you know how to collect. You can collect on him just like on anybody else. So gradually, the probability of payment of a bishop has improved dramatically. And of course, it's a bit of an over, yeah, it's just an example to tell you how over time those AIs have adapted the criteria and have fed the computation of the probability of payment in such a way that on a daily basis, the agents of the finance company, they can just pick up the data, push the button for the analysis, and immediately they get yes or no. And just to mention it, when the machine says no, it doesn't stop there. That's when a human person steps in and looks at it and say, okay, why has the computer rejected it? In many cases, it's correct. It means in many cases, you're not going to get your loan on your leasing. But in some cases, okay, the computer didn't quite understand your situation or whatever, and then you're going to get a manual approval. It still happens, but it's getting more and more marginal, I'd say. No, so now let's say you have your defender, and you off you go, and you're gone for 3-year contract, let's say, and immediately the finance company gets another AI to look at you, and with your profile, with if you are a recurring customer, of course, with whatever happened with the prior car, the computer will assign to you a probability of default, meaning what's the chance that one day you stop paying your monthly payment. And this is very critical because we have very few people working to collect on people who do not pay. And so we have to prioritize their work. And for instance, if you have a very low probability of default and you go off to Bali for 2 months with your spouse, and so you forget or something goes wrong and one payment is skipped. Well, if your probability of default is very low, nothing's going to happen. The bank will just wait for you to come back from Bali, and they know that you will be catching up. On the opposite, if your probability of default is very high, well, on the first missed payment, immediately we send out the letters, immediately we start trying to understand why you haven't paid. Now, this can be done manually, of course. You can do it on the phone, the old way, so to speak. But if you do that, then you have a lot of people employed, and therefore the leasing is very expensive, right? So to lower those costs, we are edging almost entirely the whole industry is edging against those AIs who have been able for the past decades, a couple of decades actually, to compute this POP, the probability of payment, before the contract is signed, and immediately after this POD, the probability of default. And with those metrics, we are driving how we apply the manpower we have. And this has been driving the industry for the last quarter century, I would say, and making good progress. And companies like Ford have their own. They've developed their own AI that they with their own computer scientists. And this is the heart of the engine. So this is the heart of the captive finance company. And the knowledge that is in there is really the value of the company. That's what it is. Is that okay?
No, that's a fascinating overview, which leads me sort of naturally to, I guess, the next evolution technologically, which is generative artificial intelligence. What role does Gen AI play in car finance today, and how do you believe will this change over the coming years and maybe even decades potentially?
Okay, so pre-launch of OpenAI, so let's say before a year and a half ago, we had initiatives actually led by firms like IBM to tailorize the bonus. If you've been to a car dealership, you know that on and off there are offers, and there are, you get a special, you get a deposit allowance, you get some kind of special, monetary special to make you buy the car faster. And the more difficult it is for the OEM to sell the car, the higher the bonus is going to be. Up until, let's say, 5 or 6 years ago, the bonus were the same for everybody. It was car driven. So let's say the XG cannot move because I don't know what, the wrong color, or okay, we get one bonus, £2,000. And you go into the dealership, you get £2,000. I go to the dealership, I get £2,000. That's the old way. What we started looking at and implementing little by little already 5 years ago is to tailorize this bonus by looking at your data. Possibly if you are an existing customer, we know the monthly payment you have today. We know your income. And so we know how much effort it is for you to jump on a given car. And so we are able to say, well, Philippe, he has no problem. He's got, the current monthly payment is very, very high. He's been paying with no problem. He's got good salary. We're going to give him a small bonus to make him feel good, but we're not going to go max on the bonus. But for maybe Fabien, who's trying to buy a Range Rover, and it's a very expensive car, so he needs small help. So the part of the bonus that we didn't give to Philippe, we're going to give to Fabien. So for instance, in my prior example, maybe Philippe will get £1,000, but Fabien will get £3,000 instead of the 2 initially. And so this way, we're going to try to maximize the way you can jump on the Range Rover and I can jump on whatever car I want to have. So this is quite simple, pretty basic actually. We can see this through what we call deal desking. So we used to do this by hand. Deal desking is okay, before the customer comes, we try to understand his income, how many kids he's got, blah, blah, blah. And we put everything in paper. And so before the customer arrives, we already have a game plan as to how we're going to get that customer to jump on that given card, right? But you can do that customer, of course, one customer at a time with a human being in front of a Excel spreadsheet, okay? But again, this takes a lot of time and cost is very expensive. So that's where AI and a little bit started to edge on the generative AIs has helped a lot because you can give them tons of data. You can give them your 1 million customer and they will tell you you have to give 600 pounds to that customer, 1,000 to that one. How you spread your bonuses. Bonus is a marketing budget. It's you have to use it the best you can to maximize the sale of the car, right? So from, I would say, as early as 5 years ago, we started allocating bonuses to individuals based on their need and on how the computer analyzes the deal desking based on the data that's held in the computer. And this was initially done manually to check, to make sure everything was well. But once it was set, it started running. And here you are. The bonuses are allocated customer by customers, depending on their real needs, to maximize how many customers we can touch with a given pot of bonus. Now, in the past couple of years, of course, most everybody has been using it for their personal needs or for their business needs, sometimes without talking too much about it. Because quite frankly, at the moment, there is a bit of a gray zone. And you see, finance companies all over the world are regulated, meaning they have strict rules they need to follow. And data management is a big chunk of that. Compliance is paramount. If you don't have a proper compliance to the rules in place, the consequences are massive. You can lose your business. So finance companies, they are in that phase where at the moment they are trying to understand better how generative AI can be used. Clearly, the open models that are out there, whether it's ChatGPT or Claude from Mistral, Bragg, all these open to the general public engines clearly should not be used in the bank. Why? Well, because there are still, first of all, what we call hallucinations. So these models, they are quite good, and most of the time they give you good information. But sometimes they go poof, and you don't really know why. Nobody knows why. And so it's a little bit dangerous. And so as far as I know today, I don't know any captive finance company who have readily opened the use of public GPTs for the business. And most, if not all of them, are controlling the use of these engines within the office. We can see that some firms are looking to implement their own agents, which from the past 6 months now you can do also with the one I know is the ChatGPT one, where you can create a specific agent where it's only for your use with your data, and you can much better control what's going on in this engine. But it's the very beginning, and I must say the industry is tiptoeing into it. Waiting to know what the regulators think, how it's going to be governed. And we are at that stage where it's really, a transition phase where people know of the capacity or possibilities with this type of software, and they are testing and they are cutting deals as well with the providers. Uh, Outside of the finance industry, it's now well known. There are many firms who have signed an agreement with OpenAI or with Mistral to get their specific needs addressed in a contained space where all the data and the GDPR concerns are being covered. And it's more than likely that it will get into the car finance industry space sometime soon. But as far as I'm aware, it's not the case yet. So now it doesn't stop employees to use it on the side to try to get some ideas. We run all kinds of training to make people aware of the benefits and aware of the risks. When it's perfectly okay to use an AI to look for alternatives, to discuss an idea and see what would be the feedback from customers, or estimate how customers would react. So you can engage in that type of consultation. But quite frankly, today, I do not recommend using the output as such. You have to take that output from OpenAI or from others and use it as a source that you need to check, and then get on with your actual work yourself. It's a bit like for students, if you take the risk to ask OpenAI to write your paper, and then there is an hallucination in the middle, and you don't check, well, you're going to look like a fool, right? Well, it's a little bit the same in the work industry. You don't want to take the risk to copy paste anything that comes out of those engines, because the risk is still quite high that there would be something completely stupid in there. And it's hard because LLMs, we don't know how they work. We just don't know, and we will never know. By the way, it's not a space where you will have any certainty. It's all probabilistic. It's all about computing the most probable character. So large language models are, first of all, they are language models. So all they do is predict the next letter in a chain of characters. They do nothing else. Now, they do it in a very clever way and very quickly, but it's probabilistic. It's not certain. And we will never know why they choose, if I say the cat is lying on, okay, and I ask the OpenAI to finish the sentence, there's a chance it goes for cat is laying on the floor, on the sofa, in front of the door. God knows which one of these will come out. The three possibilities that I've mentioned are all probable. Which one will be picked, we don't know. And we will never know, because that's not how it's meant. It's not meant to explain why picked the door or the floor or the sofa. It will just infer. It's the word. It's the verb. It's not very much used, but it's an inferring.
What would be your recommendation to some of these senior leaders in some of these large incumbents as it relates to car financing to maximize the value they can get from Gen AI? Are there any particular things you believe they need to be aware of?
Yes, my recommendation is that they need to set up training. It's not something you can just avoid. You have to engage. You have to offer some classes to your staff. They need to be aware of the possibilities. They need to be aware of the dangers. In my view, you need to do this in a heartbeat because this stuff is going very fast. So you can't afford having your employees moonshining with LLM without you knowing. You can't afford having your employees misusing it. So you have to forcefully develop some courses first to open up the concept, explain the rules in which what you can do, what you cannot do at home and at work. And you have to accompany people in that journey because it's going so fast that you cannot expect 100% of your employees to do this on their own. And if you don't do it, you're going to wake up. Your company will be worth nothing. So you really have to engage in training. That's, I would say, general training. And that's one. Second, I think it's urgent to engage with the providers around you. It depends which market you're in, but if you're in the US, you're going to talk to OpenAI. If you are in France, you're going to talk to Mistral. And, each one is, each company is going to look for the best provider, maybe do a tender and ask all the various providers provide for the firms. For instance, Jaguar Land Rover or Tata as a group, I would say you can probably do this at the group level. What are you prepared to provide to your staff so that they can be equipped with that kind of tools? Any job which involves data crunching can benefit. It's clear. If you have a job where you manipulate tons of data one way or another, there is an AI for you. There is a large language model for you out there who can really help. That's for sure. But you have to do it the right way. You have to protect the data. You have to do it in safe computer environment. So the processing has to be done in a safe shelter. You need to engage with those firms to obtain a service that is dedicated to your business. Because if you don't do that, the people will use it. They will moonshine. People are people. Okay, maybe you have good people, so only 10% will moonshine, but some of them will moonshine. And so you really don't want that. So for me, there are two urgencies: training and setting up what you could call a captive AI. I don't know if that makes sense, but an AI engine that is dedicated to your business and who really take care of your data and the data of your customers. And I think this is at the high level. This is what I would do if I was a director of Jaguar Land Rover. I would not wait I would not wait to hope that people train themselves alone and that they don't use LLM at work, because they will. If you don't provide an access, they will. And then the risk will come. Now, at the OEM level, it's far less regulated. Maybe you can get away with it. I can tell you, in the finance industry, you will not get away with it. You'll get caught, and you're gonna get into a pitching contest with the regulator, and you really don't want that. So I would say it's probably even more urgent in captive finance than in the OEM level, because the OEMs are less regulated and they have a bit more freedom what they can do or not do. But clearly for the banks, there is no space for moonshining, zero, no space. So you have to be really quick, because this stuff is moving very fast. And when was it? We had the first OpenAI services. What was it? 16 months ago or something like that.
Yeah,
it was November 22, I think, was when they opened up the server. So you see, not even 2 years ago. And since then, we went from ChatGPT 3 to 3.5 to 4 to 4.0. And now we have Q-Star coming. I mean, it's almost every 2 months, you have a new version that's coming in, integrating even more variables. And now we're going to the billion variable. So it's those models are very powerful. I mean, when you see what you can do with 3.5, and I don't know if you had the chance to compare 3.5 with 4.0 on the OpenAI server. It's amazing. And the 3.5 was already extremely surprising, the results, but 4.0 is amazing. So it's really, really much better. So, and this is just in a few months. So if you don't engage, you lose. So engage, train, get your own engine secured, and off you go. It's a nice ride. There's lots of things that will happen, and you know, I'm not at all worried for people's job. Some people are worried about that. I'm not, because you're gonna need people who know how to manage these tools, and so you better keep your good people and train them as fast as you can, so that they know how to use the new tool. That's my
well, it's
2 cents.
been a fascinating conversation today, Philippe. Thank you so much for joining me today.
My pleasure, my real pleasure, Fabien. I just want to clarify, I'm not an AI expert. I'm a user, and I've used AI in my prior roles very early on, almost 25 years ago. And now, of course, I'm using the LLMs as they are coming through. It's a new tool, you know. We have to use new tools all the time. It's not new. That part is not new. It's life. We have to be open to new technologies as they arrive, as fast as we can. That's how you can stay competitive. It was my pleasure, Fabien. I hope you got
Thank
what
you.
you want
Have
from this call.
No, it's been fascinating. Have a great rest of your day, Philippe.
Thank you very much, and same to you, Fabien. It was my pleasure.